Hi, I'm Andrew Hyatt. I'm going to be talking about ekg-090 latest release. It's been many months, about 9 months since the last release, since the last major release, and so I want to kind of go over what's changed. So before we start, I want to um, make sure we go over what EKG is for anyone who doesn't know. Very briefly, EKG is an Emacs note-taking system. There's many out there. EKG is not one of the most popular ones for sure, but it has users. I find it is very useful because it is different in ways that are fundamentally different than the other note-taking apps. This one is not file-based. Usually, it's the fact these note-taking systems have every node is basically a file. But I want to enable notes that have no titles and therefore can't really have a meaningful file name. I want to enable fast lookup by tags. In things like org Roam, they do this by having a database back. This is just database. Everything is in the database. So there's a bunch of benefits to this. Things are very fast. Things are consistent. And you can do things like, change tag name, like rename tags, and very easily. And there's really no issue with this sort of thing. So I want to kind of show you what it looks like. So I'm in my scratch buffer right now. Use a ekg load, ekg latest captured, and let's go to this one, which is my talk. So we've gone through what is EKG, but you're looking at version 090 now, and I want to go over what's changed for anyone who has used the previous version. It's sort of a different way of looking at things, because previously we had like this section at the top that's like this metadata section, and that was always useful because it could show a lot of information and you could edit it directly, but it got in the way because it was not, if you're in org mode, it was not org mode. And if you're like right now I'm in markdown mode, it's not markdown mode. So it's this sort of thing that Emacs just didn't support very well. So I've kind of abandoned that in terms of something simpler, which is just using a header line. So you could see the title, the tags here in the header line. And the disadvantage here is the header line can only show you so much, but generally this works. And if you want to change things instead of editing it directly, you can say Control-C/, then you can add a tag or remove a title or whatever. If you add a tag, you can, yeah, I'm not going to do that, but you can see how this basically works. I don't even remember what my PH tag means. Okay. So this is the main change, and there's some other technical changes behind the hood, but those aren't anything you'll need to see. So like the fact that like the UI is actually implemented quite differently, fine. It's not a big deal. I've also gone in and fixed some issues. Things like search work better now, and there were some significant issues previously. So for example, if you could do several kinds of search. You could do this kind of search that is, everything is, progressively rendered, and then if you press return, then you could see these notes as you type them. So that's one way of doing things. There's, FYI, there's also the embedding search, so EKG embedding search, which is let me just pasta. So this is something that will retrieve things that don't necessarily have the word, but it's about the general thing. In this case, like this does have, I think there is the word pasta for all these things, but in general, this is embedding space, so it's really doing a conceptual space retrieval. So kind of a semantic-based kind of search. So that is sort of the normal changes. The next thing I want to go over is things that I've been working on that are more on the experimental side. So these are things that you should consider works in progress. These are ideas. These ideas may not even work out, but I think they're interesting, and I personally have put some amount of time and effort into refining these, and I find them quite useful. So the first is an agent. There's been other Emacs-related agents. By agents, I mean interfaces to an LLM that will call tools and act iteratively to perform some task. And EKG has an agent. So why would this happen? What's the even relationship of a note-taking system and an agent? Well, an agent needs memory. And this system, EKG, is memory. It is able to, if you've used things like Claude Code, Pi, they have skills. You can also have skills in this agent. They're all notes, and you just tag them a certain way. And you can have, you can have agents.md or claude.md and et cetera in your file system. Here you can have a note that has a certain tag that associates with a file, a directory, or even a file. You can't do that actually in Claude or any other agent system, but you could do that here because this is not part of the file system. So you could say these instructions are for this file, and if you're manipulating this file, then this agent, the EKG agent, will load this particular set of instructions. And when it's working, it will create notes, and it will alter those notes. It will update those. It could do anything with your notes. So the idea is that you have your notes in here, and your agent has its notes in here, and your agent knows what you know because those are in the notes, and you know what your agent knows because those are in the notes. And there's some, that it has memory because it knows what it did before because those are part of the notes. I find it's a very elegant idea. I think the strong part is yes, it's a memory system. This works, and I think that's great. The weak part of the idea is I think having an agent in Emacs is nice. In some ways, it does things that other agents cannot do. For example, if you want your agent to, change a file, it can do that. It'll just check to see if there's a buffer, and if it's a buffer, it'll change the buffer and not save it. So if you're in the middle of a change, you don't have to worry about file conflicts. It'll just change that buffer. So that is, let me give a demonstration. So you say ekg-agent ask, and it could do a lot. For example, it could search the web and get web pages through the Emacs browser and its functions. So I can just say, what's the weather? And what it's going to do is it's going to bring up this buffer. This buffer is kind of going to show you the progress as it calls various tools, and you can see what tools it's calling. So it's calling web search, makes sense, and then it could call anything. You could have it call eLisp. The tools are up to you. These are also, you could add your own tools. There's the main Emacs tools are going to have the same tool definition. So you can, mix and match tools as you want. So it pulled up this result buffer. So when it's done, it just writes to a buffer. I find this very nice. So this is great. I could see this is, perfectly nice functionality. You will have a hard time getting this, I think, from other, other agents might be able to do this. But other Emacs packages, you could ask anything and it will do it. It has lots of ways to do whatever it wants, And if you give it eLisp access, which is a little bit dangerous because it could theoretically do anything, but if you give it that access, truly, like, there's nothing going to stop it from doing whatever it wants to do and whatever it can do. And if you're using a good model, this should work out pretty well, I think. That is the agent. It also, one thing I should mention is that you can also have the agent just append to your note. I find this is useful in many ways. Or replace your note and be like, oh, I want you to rewrite this note and whatever. Or you might have a question like, I'm like thinking about a problem and now I want input from the agent. And so please write whatever, like some text below that's going to help me out. And the agent has the ability to just look at your notes. It'll do searches itself. It will just keep working until it finds things, what you're trying to want, and then it will do it. So I think like this is really cool. I've been using it more and more. Okay, that is the ekg-agent experiment. So let's get to the last experiment, which is ekg-org. ekg-org is also something that I've done for agentic coding. The core idea here is that when you do agentic coding, you're basically feeding prompts to a LLM. And most people just, take those prompts from their brain. They're like, oh, this is what I'm working on. This is what I want to do. I feel like Emacs users have a great advantage of like, we use org mode. But the problem is, once you start using org mode to feed prompts to a LLM, which people have started to do, you have the problem then it's logical that the agent should modify those prompts. It should mark things done when they're done. It could create sub-items. It can change the text of the items. But if you're editing this and it's editing this, it just doesn't work if it's a file. Like, org mode has no way to make this work. So instead, what we can do is we can say that instead of an org mode file being changed, every org mode file, every org mode element, every task is an EKG note. So to see what this looks like, we can just look at this note I created to demonstrate this, which is to create the video. And you can see that the title in this case is the headline. This is what this task is. It has a scheduled date, and it has these kind of tags that mark it as an org task. So without this, it just wouldn't ever interface with this system I'm about to show you. But it says it's an org task, and that state is to do. These are represented by tags. And it has, the stuff in here is what is contained in the note. What is contained in the item. So you have an item, it has a task, but the details, the stuff that actually matters to like what you're actually instructing it to do, are what you want to store, is in the note. And this note could be anything. Just because we're kind of going to simulate org mode, I'll show you how in a second, doesn't mean this has to be org. In this case, this is actually markdown. Right? So it's marked down in org, in what you'll see is sort of trying to be org mode. So what can you do with this? Well, if you go to the agenda, you can see that this actually can appear on the agenda. And the way we do this is we have a virtual file system that reads EKG's notes, org notes, as an org file. So we just kind of make up an org file that is really just for the agenda, so you can see these things on the agenda. And great. So this can sort of fit into the way you're working and live amongst other kind of real org mode stuff, and that's useful. On the other hand, how editing this through the notes interface is kind of clunky, especially impossible as trying to do subtasks and things like that. So we have this thing, ekg-org view, and that shows you all your org items in an org-like UI, but it is not org. It is everything here is just the stuff backed by EKG, and it has a very different interface because this is all database backed. Everything is like a database entity. We can't just have this whole thing be a free form text. Like everything is much more structured. So let me kind of show you. Okay, we can have a subtask here, and you can move this up, down, or promote and demote it to like whatever level you want. But actually not whatever level you want. Like org mode, you could have this thing like be, have many levels deep, but it doesn't make sense here because like everything has to have a parent. So this can't be at a level where it doesn't have a parent. So if I, when I create this, its parent is going to be this previous one, and it keeps track of this in a way that is quite useful. And that is, I kind of think I wish org mode made all this stuff better, because trying to deal with org mode and get this information out of org mode and for the task, it's kind of a pain in a lot of ways. But here, everything is a note, everything has a good API, everything is well structured. So we could say, okay, this is the video, record the experimental section. Yeah, so do that. And then if you want to actually write it, you're back in the note-taking UI. So yes, your agent can be changing stuff. And if your agent is changing things because it's running, and you've sent this to a note, so like the idea is like you write something, this is kind of has something you have to do because everyone is working differently and has different agents. But you could say, the way I do this is I have a skill that I invoke. And I say, okay, start an agent, and then send it the ID, the EKG ID of this thing. And then the skill tells it how to read the EKG data. And that way, the agent gets the text and can start executing it. And then the agent can start manipulating this as well. And it does this because we have this agent tools directory. This is something you just have to clone or download the source. I'll have a link below to get access to. So you'll have to set this up manually if you want to use it. There might be a better way to do this, but I don't know it yet. But these are all shelf commands that use Emacs client to manipulate EKG. And you can see that it does basically the kinds of stuff you want to do, you want the agent to have access to. And there's a skill that you could link to from however you set up your skills that explains how to do all this. Now, of course, if you're using the EKG agent, you don't need this stuff because ekg agent can do all of this stuff already, and it knows how to do all this. But for interfacing with other agents, this is useful. And so you kind of have a great experience of like, you're just watching this and like things are changing out from under you because your agent is doing stuff and you're working with the agent and doing stuff. I'd love to show you, but like it's kind of hard to set this up in a demo and like, mainly I'm doing this at work where I just don't want to share that information on a public video. So I find this super compelling, but it is experimental. I don't know if this makes sense. The problem with this is this looks like org mode, but it's not org mode. And there's lots of stuff it can't do yet. You can't set, for example, an estimate. That said, in the agentic world, I don't think estimates make sense anymore. I've been just doing things that sort of make sense for me and my workflows, but this is far from complete, especially for people. Like lots of people have their own favorite org mode functionality, and we can only support some of those. But I hope these experiments are compelling and useful for people, and that they give people, I'd love it if people try this out and said what's working and what isn't. And, if you want to contribute, please, this is not, you do not need any, you could contribute with an agent, it's fine with me, but let's, that makes sense if you're getting some value out of this already. So please, I hope you do. I'm going to have the link below. You can ask questions here in the video, or you can ask questions in the discussion on GitHub. I also, you could donate to my development. This is something that's useful for me, especially because this stuff does actually cost me money. I am using agents to test this out, and I'm using agents to write some of this, not all of it. Basically, the experimental stuff is the stuff I've been using agents for. The core stuff is all handwritten. So, okay, thank you so much, and I hope everyone can enjoy 090, and I hope that you enjoy the ideas, even if you don't use it. I hope these ideas can spur some thoughts about how Emacs and org mode can be used in this new agentic world. Thanks.